Children from fatherless homes are 4 times more likely to live in poverty, 7 times more likely to become teen parents, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in prison. And all it took was one missing person to create 20 times the risk. Psychology has spent over 50 years quietly documenting what a father's absence does to the developing brain of a child. The findings are more specific and in some ways more disturbing than what's actually discussed around this topic. So let's dive in. As every child grows up, their brain subconsciously asks 3 questions. The first one is, can people be trusted? Am I worth caring about? And when things go wrong, is it my fault? These questions need to be answered during the development of the child's brain because the parts of the brain responsible for trust and emotions are not fully built at birth. They finish being built in the early years of life, so the brain is looking for answers, and the people closest to that child are the answers. So when the father isn't there, those questions don't just go unanswered. The absence becomes the answer. And the child carries those answers into every relationship they encounter for the rest of their lives. Here's what makes this very important. Research confirmed that fathers answer a separate set of questions than mothers do for the child. A father's involvement predicts how secure a child feels in relationships independently of the mother, meaning that you can have the most present and loving mom in the world, but the father's absence will still leave questions unanswered. So children with both questions answered show significantly stronger resilience later in life than children with only one answer. And one of the things that isn't answered properly is the behavioral development of the child. The first type of behavioral problem is a outward problem, such as outward aggression, where the child lashes out on other kids and the teachers at school, or even lashing out on the parent and other siblings at home. And then you just have them where they generally get in trouble a lot more often at school. And, school being a pipeline to prison systems is a big issue. The second type of behavioral problem is an inward problem where we see issues of anxiety, depression, and shutting down in life, or even escapism. Children from father absent homes are twice as likely to drop out of high school and more likely to be expelled. They typically score lower academically even after you remove poverty from the equation, meaning that the effect exists above and beyond money. But why? Why does a missing parent produce those specific outcomes? Well, see, because it's not just about having someone in the home. It's about what that person builds in the child's brain while they are present. So a 2014 study found that children without consistent father involvement developed a weaker ability to focus and a weaker ability to control impulses. In order for these abilities to be strengthened, they would need to be built through repeated interactions with a present or engaged caregiver. But if those interactions don't happen, the skills don't fully develop, and not because the child is incapable, but because the builder isn't there. Children do not learn how to handle their emotions on their own. They learn by watching someone else handle emotions with them first. And because the brain's emotional control system is developed through experience and not at birth, anytime a child is upset and a caregiver steps in to calm them down, the brain is building the capacity for emotional regulation. So it takes hundreds of repetitions before the child can do it independently, maybe even thousands. And when a father isn't present, there are simply fewer of these repetitions happening, fewer moments of someone sitting with the child while they feel sad and showing them the way out of those emotions. And research confirms that children from father absent homes show higher level of stress hormones, meaning that their nervous system is running hot by default. A child whose brain is stressed out will make it harder for the child to learn anything at school, so it will be harder for them to make good decisions, and they will frequently fail at managing social situations. So think about that for a second. If you grew up without a present father or a father who was emotionally unavailable, where did you learn to shake back after a bad situation? Who showed you how to do that? And if the answer isn't clear, then there's likely a gap in your development. And there is also a difference between how fatherlessness affects boys and girls as they grow up. So, let's look into that as well. So, for boys to start off, the biggest documented effect is on behavior and identity. Boys without fathers are significantly more likely to become aggressive, more likely to join gangs and criminal organizations, and also are more likely to act out physically. The reason comes down to two things. First of all, boys learn how to be men by watching a man. When there's no men around, they don't get a model for how to handle emotions like a man, how to deal with frustration like a man, or how to deal with their relationships like a man. So the brain looks for those answers somewhere else. And if that child is in a single mother household, they're looking at a woman to help them become a man. See, that's a major problem. A boy needs a masculine male figure to develop a stable sense of masculine identity, because without it, that development becomes disrupted. A boy uses his father specifically to answer the question of how to be a male. Without that answer, the gap is filled with whatever the environment provides. So if a young man's environment consists of social media propaganda and a single mother household to couple, there's now a cocktail of ingredients that drift young men even further away from their own masculinity. So now you have young men whose environments are comprised of social media influencers who pose as male role models, promoting looks maxing, and male figures who show themselves wearing nail polish and makeup. And also the promotion of gang violence and crime within communities that these young men stay in is all a part of, or at least the effects of, fatherlessness in communities where men were primarily the leaders and the ones who would hold the examples of what it meant to provide for communities, establish communities, and to also police communities. For the girls, on the other hand, the effects of it land in a completely different place. So research found that girls who grow up without fathers reach puberty significantly earlier than girls who have a present father, because stress hormones in the body accelerate physical development in an unstable environment. So the body is literally reading the environment as unsafe and then rushing towards adulthood as a threat response. A early puberty is linked to higher rates of depression, earlier sexual activity, and more difficulty in relationships. And separately, research found that girls from father-absent homes seek male approval more intensely and are more promiscuous and experience higher anxiety around whether relationships will last. The absence of a secure relationship with the first male figure in their life becomes the blueprint they use for future relationships. So both boys and girls are responding to the same thing, which is a question that needed an answer, but the answer got filled in the wrong way. So again, for the person who experienced fatherlessness while they were growing up, the problems that they have show up in every room they walk into as they get older. A 2006 study found that children from father-absent homes consistently experience more peer rejection and less social acceptance, even after we account for factors like income, living in the suburbs, and even how prestigious of a school that the child went to. A separate 25-year study found that adults who grew up without fathers showed higher rates of divorce, more difficulty trusting partners, and greater struggles with emotional intimacy in long-term relationships. The answers that their brain formed in childhood about whether people can be trusted or whether they are worth caring about, those answers still run in the background decades later. See, when a person's emotional regulation system is underdeveloped, they're generally harder to be around. A friendship requires you to be able to handle disagreement without blowing up, share thoughts and feelings without withdrawing, and the ability to recover when something goes wrong socially. But what develops instead is a nervous system that is always on alert. Every social situation is anticipating rejection. There's always a thought that the end of the relationship is inevitable and feeling like there's never a safe place to relax. Substance use and substance abuse are very common in fatherless households. Children who grow up without a steady father figure are not shown healthy ways to cope with stress, anger, or sadness. And as teens or adults, when life becomes hard, alcohol or drugs become a way that they numb their feelings, even though the drugs don't actually fix anything. There's often a emptiness that comes from feeling unwanted, abandoned, or less than that fatherlessness usually brings into a person's life. And drugs can be really good at temporarily filling that emptiness. So the problem is that the emptiness is always there. And the person keeps coming back to fill the emptiness with the drugs. And that person becomes susceptible to falling into drug addiction. So a single parent is usually at work more than they are watching the kid, and which can mean more unsupervised time for children to experiment with drugs and fewer conversations about why using a substance is risky. Especially for boys, the father is a model for how a man handles failure, fear, or frustration. Without the father, a boy may cope with whatever unhealthy coping mechanisms that they see around him, especially with a lot of women liking to vape these days. That's a big thing we also see in schools with young children. Middle schools and high schools, you see kids that like to go and vape in bathrooms. There's videos of it on Instagram and TikTok. And the thing is, though, plenty of people with absent fathers never struggle with substances, and plenty of those with a present father still do. It's really just about the factors that stack up against a child. And if any of those factors can be addressed, like, having a strong mentor, therapy, or having a supportive community, that can shift the whole picture for that child. Here's what is important to understand. A father's absence is definitely a risk factor, definitely, but it is not a life sentence. The strongest factor is the presence of any consistent, involved male figure in a child's life, not a biological father specifically, but someone like a grandfather, a uncle, a older brother, a stepfather, a coach, a mentor, or a teacher. A child with even one consistent non-biological male figure will show significantly better outcomes than children with none at all. A child requires consistency, availability, and genuine attachment. Another major factor is the quality of the parent who is present. Research shows that when the mother or primary caregiver provides warm, consistent, engaged parenting, the effects of an absent father are significantly reduced. The child's brain is still looking for data, and a fully present, emotionally available primary caregiver provides a lot of that data already. And therapy may also work, but the results are not guaranteed. Specifically, attachment-focused therapy does show strong evidence for updating the internal answers the brain formed in childhood. The answers that were locked into the brain at an early age are not permanent. And one thing about the brain is that it has the ability to change. It does take deliberate work, but it is indeed possible according to research. This is all a story about what a developing brain needs and what happens when part of that need goes unmet. The children in this research are not failures. Their brains did exactly what developing brains are supposed to do. They adapt to the environment they were given. The outcomes are not their fault. And the greater thing about it is that they're not permanent either. The pattern can be interrupted, gaps can be addressed, the chains can be broken, and the brain's answers can be updated. But only once you understand what produced those answers in the first place can that change become more attainable.